Howdy, howdy, guys. Today we're going to be talking about environmental challenges. So, for all of you out there who really care about the environment, maybe you'll really enjoy today. So, we should be taking care of our environment, the world around us. We only have one and we should maintain it and keep it up to the best of our ability. So, let's kind of talk about some environmental challenges that we face today. So, have you ever heard your parents or maybe grandparents kind of complain about how we never used to have tornadoes in winter. We never used to have hurricanes like this, things like that, right? Well, there may be some truth to it. Maybe they're exaggerating a little bit like we all do. But the world is definitely changing, and we're going to be getting into that today. So one of the things that is happening in our world right now is what's called global warming. So it is a very significant threat because as the Earth's average temperature rises, that means that more ice caps will melt. It's going to be hotter as the year progresses. Winters will become weaker, things like that. So it will have an effect on your life. So what exactly is global warming? Well, it refers to the Earth's average temperature increasing. Essentially, the Earth's average temperature has risen between 0.9 and 1.3 degrees since the 1800s. Now, there's a couple things to consider here. One, it's only been about since the 1800s since we've been tracking temperature. So is it possible that the temperature goes up and then it goes down every couple hundred years? Is the Earth on a cyclical cycle where it's got warming periods and then cooling periods, warming periods, then cooling periods? Those are all very possible. And we don't know because we haven't been tracking this data long enough. There are records in history of very, very cool time periods and also very, very hot time periods. So many scientists think that the temperature may rise another 2.5 to 10 degrees by the end of this century. So by the end of this century, within our own lifetimes, or at least your guys' lifetime, it may rise at least 2 degrees on average. We don't know for sure. It's just kind of a theory that many scientists propose, but obviously as the temperature increases, things are going to happen. Like I said, ice caps will melt. Summer is going to be even hotter, things like this. Now, just because the ice caps melt does not necessarily mean the sea level will rise. So think about a cup of ice. You've got a cup of ice, you fill it all the way up to the top with ice, then you pour in water all the way up to the top. Okay? If you leave it out on a counter and just let it sit there, the ice is going to melt. Will that force the water to spill over, or will it stay in the cup? It's going to stay in the cup because that density is already taken account for. So when the ice caps, the icebergs that are essentially in the water, when they melt, sea level doesn't rise. However, what can cause the sea level to rise is, let's say there's glaciers like on Greenland, on land. If that melts, it can cause sea levels to rise. But the ice that's already in the oceans, if it melts, it will not cause the sea levels to rise. That doesn't do it. So, what is causing some of these things to happen? One of the things to cause global warming is called the greenhouse effect, the trapping of the sun's heat by gases in the Earth's atmosphere. So essentially what happens is we have the Earth here, and the sun is shooting at it. It's shooting these rays, and it's getting trapped inside the Earth, and it doesn't always bounce out. Okay, so it used to be that the sun's rays would be able to bounce out. Now, because a lot of these gases, such as CO2 and things, it's trapping it in the Earth, and it's staying in the Earth's atmosphere, causing it to heat up slowly over time. So these gases act like a glass roof. They let in solar energy, which heats up the plants, and they trap much of the heat that rises from the Earth's surface. The same is essentially happening. Other causes: any gases in the atmosphere that contribute to greenhouse gases is called a greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases include water vapor, carbon dioxide, as well as other things as well. The burning of fossil fuels, so when you drive your car or when your parents are driving your car, there are fossil fuels that are being burned up. Same with coal. If we're burning coal, it allows fossil fuels to go up into the atmosphere. So we have carbon dioxide escaping into the atmosphere. Now, it's at minor levels. It's not like when you're driving your car, it's releasing so much into the atmosphere that it's going to just destroy it. That's not the case. But if you get enough people driving their cars at the same time, it can really have a devastating effect on the atmosphere. So another thing that we would call this is just pollution, right? You would see smog and it looks kind of cloudy, right? That's because a lot of people are driving their cars and they have a lot of carbon dioxide coming out. It was so bad in China at one point. There was a guy who took a vacuum cleaner through the streets of China, sucking up carbon dioxide. And after a month of doing this, his vacuum had a solid brick of what essentially was a carbon dioxide brick just from all the pollution that was being emitted over in Beijing, China. We don't have anything like that here. We don't have any pollution quite that bad, but it still can have a devastating effect on our environment. So the impact, as gas builds in the atmosphere becomes warmer and warmer. It's slowly heating itself up almost. This could be significant. It could be significantly affect the climate, as warmer temperatures could cause ice caps and glaciers to melt and sea levels to rise, causing massive flooding. Now, we already kind of talked about this. The ice that's already in the ocean, if that melts, it's not going to cause sea levels to rise. Okay, think of a cup filled with ice. If that ice melts, it's not going to overflow. But what can cause sea levels to rise is those glaciers and those ice caps that are on land. That could cause sea levels to rise, and it can cause flooding. So the problem with this is that you would sometimes get homes that would be lost. People could potentially die. Crops would no longer be able to grow in certain areas. There would be more drought, things like this. So here's kind of an example of it. The sun is shooting out this solar radiation. Some of it bounces off, goes back out into space. Sometimes it's being trapped because of the carbon dioxide, and it's kind of just bouncing back and forth, heating up the Earth. And we're constantly being bombarded by solar radiation. So what are potential solutions to this? Well, lowering the levels of greenhouse gases is complex. It's a worldwide goal. Most countries in the world, there's only a handful that really don't care about this, but most of them want to lower greenhouse gases. One solution is to build more energy efficient cars and factories. That would help play a small role in it. Another solution could be to use alternative energy sources produced by the sun, such as solar or potentially wind. Wind energy is caused by the sun, actually, because the sun is heating up these air pockets, and these air pockets are what creates wind. So we can use the sun's energy in a variety of forms. Many nations have come together to try to decrease emissions. Emissions are a substance discharged into the air. They're typically bad. Another problem that is adding to all of this CO2-wise are cows. So cows are a big problem because of gas they emit and just them burping. Okay, let's be honest. They're emitting a lot of carbon dioxide, and we eat a lot of beef, steak, things like that. So obviously if there were less cows, that would also play a role into this as well. Just kind of something funny that no one really ever talks about. Okay, so that's greenhouse gases, that's global warming, kind of in a 2-3 minute nutshell. Next you have what's called desertification. Desertification is the process in which farmland becomes less productive because the land is degraded. The land becomes more like a desert, which is dry and unproductive. It's a serious problem, and each year about 25,000 square miles of land area, essentially the size of West Virginia, is degraded. So a great example of this for us would be what's called the Dust Bowl. So what happened was in World War I, farmers had to increase the amount they were farming because of supply and demand. there was a giant demand for crops, for wheat, for corn, things like this over in Europe because of the war. So farmers started farming more. And they used the land so much that it became just like dust. And desertification essentially happened. In parts of Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Kansas, Colorado were greatly affected by the Dust Bowl. And in the early 1920s, you would have these giant windstorms that would sweep up dust and they would cover entire cities. So that is right there in a nutshell an example of desertification happening here in America. Now there are precautions that farmers take. They typically rotate their crops. They don't farm the same chunk of land every single year. They'll give it breaks occasionally. So some causes. Natural vegetation is removed or destroyed, whether it's through man or just animals, and it's exposed to top wind, which then is just kind of whipping it back and forth. Without shade from the sun, the moisture in the soil evaporates quickly. These top layers of soil are then blown away, and you'll have giant dust bowls, dust storms, and you're not really able to grow crops on this land. So practices that contribute to this is overgrazing. Animals just continue to eat the same land over and over. You have cows just eating the same grass over and over, and eventually plants aren't able to grow back. Cultivation, planting crops in really fragile soil, and also deforestation. When you cut down a bunch of trees, you tear them out, and you don't plant new ones in, it can also lead to desertification. So here's an example of what that looks like. Other examples you can look up online, just look up the Dust Bowl, and you'll see just how sad it kind of is. And you guys may have seen parts of the country that look like this, especially out in certain parts of Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. You might witness certain areas of land that look very similar to this. So what are solutions to desertification? So a simple solution is to build sand fences that interrupt the wind, or to use straw mats to replace evaporation, laying straw mats on the ground. Planting tree fences and grass belts also reduces the spread of sandy areas. These solutions are sustainable practices, meaning that these practices use natural resources in a way that reassures that they will exist for future generations. Are there other ways we can help with desertification? Yes, the government has enacted policies to try to limit farmers from over farming land and stuff like that. So today was all about environmental challenges that not only the world faces, but that we in America face. The big points for the day is global warming, you have greenhouse gases, and you also have desertification. All of these things are shaping our world, and it affects our geography. Think about if global warming really increased and it melted those ice caps that are on land. It could allow chunks of land in Florida or parts of the East Coast to be covered up by water. So these things do play into our geography. All right, guys, that's it for today.